All right, let's talk about a concept that trips up so many people, from first-year students all the way up to CEOs. I'm talking about direct versus indirect costs. If you get this wrong, you could be steering what looks like a profitable company straight off a cliff. But if you get it right, well, it becomes your secret weapon for just acing your exams and, frankly, for making brilliant business decisions.
Okay, let's just dive right in with a quick scenario. Imagine you're a product manager. Your company is called Simple Widgets Incorporated, and you've just launched a brand new product, Product Beta. The big question on everyone's mind is, are we actually making any money on this thing?
So you do the first pass analysis, right? You run the initial numbers. The selling price? A cool $130. Now, the obvious costs, the materials you can actually touch, the labor you can point to, that all adds up to 80 bucks. And that leaves you with a very nice looking $50 profit on every single unit. Looks like a total winner. Time to pop the champagne, right? Well, hold on a second. What about the rent for the factory? The electricity bill that keeps the lights on? Or what about the salary of the plant manager who oversees, well, everything? These are those kind of hidden shared costs that don't neatly tie to any one product. And you know what? Ignoring them is one of the biggest blind spots in all of finance. Because when you properly account for all those shared costs and you assign a fair slice of them to product beta, the picture changes. And I mean, it changes dramatically. All of a sudden, that $50 profit just vanishes, and you realize you're actually losing over $3 on every single unit you sell. Your winning product is secretly sinking the entire company. And that is why mastering this topic isn't just about passing some test, it's about survival. So, how do we avoid this catastrophe? Well, that's exactly what we're going to break down. First, we'll get into the one simple question that changes everything, the traceability test. Then we're going to see these costs out in the wild, everywhere from car factories to courtrooms. We'll defuse the most common exam traps that are designed to trick you. We'll see how these numbers drive huge, real-world strategy. And finally, I'm going to give you a step-by-step shortcut to get this right every single time. Okay, so how do we solve this puzzle of product beta and avoid making that same costly mistake? It really all comes down to one single core idea, the traceability test. And let me tell you, this is the single most important concept we are going to cover. So here's the deal. A direct cost is any cost that you can easily and conveniently trace to a specific thing you're trying to find the cost of, what we accountants call a cost object. Now, a cost object can be anything, really. A product like a single car, a service like preparing a legal case, or even an entire department. Basically, if you want to know what it costs, it's a cost object. Now, an indirect cost, it's just the opposite. It supports multiple things all at once, so you can't trace it. Instead, you have to allocate it, which is really just a fancy way of saying you have to find a logical way to spread that cost around. Let's make this super tangible. Picture this, a big shared kitchen, like a food hall. Inside, you've got an Italian place, a Mexican restaurant, and a bakery, all working side by side. Okay, our cost object, the thing we want to find the cost of, is the Italian restaurant. So the mozzarella cheese they buy? That's a direct cost. You can literally watch the chef put that cheese directly onto their pizzas and their pastas. Easy to trace. But what about the rent for the entire kitchen space? Well, that's an indirect cost. It benefits all three businesses, right? So you can't trace it just to the Italian place. You have to logically divide or allocate a piece of that rent bill to each one. All right, so that's the theory. Now, let's see how this actually plays out in the real world. Because this stuff isn't just for textbooks. It's exactly how every successful business on the planet understands its own profitability. Let's take a Tesla Model 3. That huge $8,500 battery pack? That is a textbook direct cost. Its serial number can be traced to a specific car's vehicle identification number, or VIN. Same goes for the assembly labor that puts it all together. But the rent for the factory and the salary for the plant security guards, those are indirect costs. They support the entire Fremont facility, which makes multiple car models. So Tesla has to allocate a tiny piece of those big costs to each and every vehicle that rolls off the line. And it's not just about physical products you can touch. Let's look at a service business, like a law firm handling a specific divorce case. We'll call it the Johnson case. The 34 hours a senior partner spends working on that one case, that's a direct cost, totally traceable through their timesheet. An expert witness they hired just for that one case? Also direct. But the rent for their fancy downtown office and their expensive subscription to a legal research database? Those are indirect. They support all of the firm's cases, so they have to be allocated across all of them. Okay, now for the really good stuff. Knowing the definitions is one thing, but exams, they are often designed to trick you. So let's diffuse the two biggest gotcha scenarios that separate the A-plus students from, well, from everyone else. All right, first up, trap number 1. Students see examples like direct materials, which are variable, and factory rent, which is fixed, and they start to think there's some kind of permanent rule. Direct costs are always variable and indirect costs are always fixed. So, is that true? And the answer is an emphatic, capital letters, no. This is probably the single biggest mistake people make when learning this stuff. These are two completely different, totally independent ways of looking at a cost. Think of it this way. Traceability, whether a cost is direct or indirect, that's one question. Cost behavior, whether it's variable or fixed, is a completely separate question. You can absolutely have a cost that is both direct and fixed. Just imagine leasing a specialized machine that is only used for one single product line. That lease payment is fixed every month, but it's 100% traceable to that one product. So the crucial takeaway is this. Always ask two separate questions. Question 1, can I trace it? And question 2, does it change with volume? All right, here's trap number 2, and this one is a little bit more subtle. You might learn that factory rent is an indirect cost, and you might just memorize that as a rule. But is a cost classification permanent? Is factory rent always an indirect cost? And once again, the answer is no. This is what we call the relativity principle. A cost classification is not absolute. It is always relative to the cost object. Just look at this example, an assembly department manager's salary. If your cost object is the assembly department itself, that salary is a direct cost. The entire salary is traceable right to that department. But if you zoom in and your cost object becomes a single bicycle made in that department, that same salary suddenly becomes an indirect cost. You can't trace a specific slice of their time to just one bike. It has to be allocated. The rule is simple. You must always identify your cost object first. Always. So why does all this technical jargon matter beyond the classroom? Because the way you choose to allocate those indirect costs can completely change your understanding of your own business, and it can lead to wildly different strategies. Let's go back to simple widgets. Let's say they've got two products, alpha and beta. Now, if they use a really simple but flawed allocation method, like just spreading all the overhead costs evenly across every unit they produce, their analysis looks like this. Product beta appears to be the superstar, right? And product alpha is kind of lagging behind. The obvious strategy? Go all in on product beta. But here's the twist. What if product beta is way more complex and it actually chews up 4 times the machine time to produce? If you use a smarter allocation method, one based on machine hours, which is a much better driver of those overhead costs, the entire picture just flips on its head. Look at that. Suddenly, product alpha is your real star performer, and product beta, well, that's the money loser we discovered right at the very beginning. The right method revealed the truth and instantly changed the strategy from full steam ahead on beta to, uh-oh, we need to fix or maybe even drop beta right now. Okay, that was a lot. I get it. So how do you pull all of this together when you're staring down a tough exam question and the clock is just ticking away? Let's build a simple, repeatable protocol you can use to absolutely nail it every single time. Here's your framework. Step 1, and this is the most important. Identify the cost object. What are we trying to cost? Step 2, examine the relationship between the cost and that object. Step 3, apply the master question. Can it be easily and conveniently traced? Step 4, consider if the amount is significant enough to even be worth tracking directly. Step 5, check for consistency with how other similar costs are treated. And finally, step 6, you make your classification. Follow these steps in this order, and you are going to have a bulletproof answer. So if you remember only one thing from this entire explainer, I want it to be this. When you are faced with any cost classification problem, the question you have to ask yourself is not, is it fixed or variable, or is it a big number or a small number? The ultimate test, the only test that really matters is, can you trace it? If you can trace it, it's direct. If you can't, it's indirect. Traceability is the test. You master that, and you've mastered the very core of cost accounting.